Hey, welcome back to eCOWnomics. We are on podcast number 4, chapter 3. We are going to be going over one of the most important concepts in economics, and that is demand and supply. I'm Angela Thurman. I'm an economics professor here at Tarrant County.
I'm Austin Haynes. I'm a supplemental student here at Tarrant County College. I'm asking questions on behalf of the students.
He's asking those burning questions that all of you have in your mind about
Supply and
economics.
demand. Oh, economics. Sorry.
Exactly, about supply and demand, all of that stuff. So what we're going to talk about today is demand, supply, and equilibrium, right? So, Austin, when I say supply and demand, what does that make you think of?
How much of something we're producing and how much people want it.
That is very good, and that is a good, concise answer. And what I want you guys to think about when you think about supply and demand, I want you to think about everything. Everything.
So like ice cream cones.
There's a demand for ice cream cones. There is a supply of ice cream cones.
And demand for ice cream cones are high in the summer.
In the summer.
But in the winter, probably not as high.
Probably not as high, yeah. There's a demand and supply for labor. There is, believe it or not, there is a demand and supply for murder. One of my one of the people in grad school with me actually did their thesis on that, on the concept, because a lot of people say not everything can be put into the demand and supply model. But the point is, yes, everything can. So you think of one thing that can't.
Murder?
Okay, fine. You want to go there? Okay, since I went there. So there is obviously a demand for murder because people get murdered all the time, right?
I guess, but I wouldn't say they're demanding.
Okay, so that means there must be a supply of people willing to kill people, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so what would deter you from actually carrying out the crime?
Penalties.
Exactly, the fear of getting caught, right? If the penalty were more severe, do you think that that would decrease the number of people willing to commit the crime?
I would think.
I would think so too. So if you think, okay, I'm going to commit this crime, and even if I get caught, I'm going to, talk my way out of it, or I'm willing to go to jail for whatever, a little bit of time because I know the system or whatever. Versus if you said, whoa, if I get caught, I'm going to get the death penalty and I'm going to, get the chemicals within 2 years. That would deter you, correct?
I would think so.
So what would give you the incentive to carry out a crime like that?
Money?
Exactly, right? So forget the people that do it in a crime of passion because that's different. This is premeditated.
Oh, so you're talking about an economic choice to commit a murder
That's exactly
to
right.
make money.
It is an economic choice. How much money would it take to overcome the negative incentives? And then that's the supply side. And then the demand side would be how much would someone be willing to give up to have that crime committed? So even when you talk about something like that, it is all about supply and demand.
That's crazy.
It is crazy. It makes it real. So demand, supply, and equilibrium. So when I talk about equilibrium, I'm talking about the point at which the quantity that is demanded is equal to the quantity that is supplied. When those two are equal on a graph, they'll intersect. So first we need to decide what's demand, what's supply, what is quantity demanded and quantity supplied. You need to know the difference. So demand is the sum total of all of the different price and quantity demanded combinations that there are. So let me give you an example. If I were to say to you, Austin, would you like a milkshake?
Yes.
Okay. How much would you like a milkshake? Would you like it if it cost $10?
No.
Really good. Really,
No.
really, really good.
No.
Nope. Would you like it if it cost $8?
No.
$7?
No.
$6?
Yeah.
Okay. So that means that your demand curve starts at 6.
6.
So for $6, you will demand one milkshake.
$6, one milkshake.
Okay. If you were lactose intolerant, then you would not have a demand at all, correct?
Unless I used almond milk.
Which I'm not using
Okay.
that. I'm using real milk. So you either have a demand for a good or service or you don't at all. So if you do not have the demand, you're not even representative on the demand curve. So we're going to cut out the lactose intolerant people and the people that, for whatever bizarre reason, don't like a milkshake. So everyone on the demand curve likes a milkshake. You would buy one, the quantity that you would demand at a price of 6 would be 1.
Okay.
Would you buy 2 for $6?
Say I get 2 milkshakes and I only pay $6?
No, $6 each.
Okay. I guess if I was on a date
Okay. All right. So you would buy one
for $6.
for $6. You would also buy two. Would you go to three for
No.
$6 each? You would not. Would you buy three if they were $5 each? Now you're going out on a date and she's got a kid.
Yes.
All right. Would you buy four?
For $5 each?
Yes.
Does she have 2 kids?
No, but her kid has a friend.
Yeah, I would. But
Okay.
I think that's just the fine Southern upbringing.
There you go. So you are illustrating the point that the quantity that you demand goes up as the price goes down, right?
Yes.
So that is the demand curve. Okay, so the demand curve is one single line, but it is made up of thousands of different points, and each point represents a different price, quantity, demanded combination. Okay?
Okay.
So the difference is that quantity demanded changes with what? What was making you change the number of milkshakes you would buy?
The price?
The price. So when price changes, quantity demanded changes. Okay. The important thing about that is if the price is changing, that means you are moving up or down the line. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so a price change leads to movement along the line. It does not make the line itself move, meaning demand does not change when a price changes. Only quantity demanded changes. Let me give you an example.
Okay.
If you were lactose intolerant, you would demand 0. But if the price went down to $2, would that change your demand?
No.
No. You have no demand. The price doesn't affect your demand. You either have the demand or you do not have the demand, right?
Correct.
So a price change only allows movement up or down the curve. It does not make the curve itself move, all right? At this point, I would like to tell everyone that if you go to Blackboard and you go to Unit 1 and you scroll down, you will see 2 handouts labeled Demand Handout and Supply Handout. I strongly suggest that you print those out and refer to them often because everything that you need to know about supply and demand are on those handouts. All right. But now we're going to move on. So that's demand and that's quantity demanded. That is all from the buyer's perspective. Supply and quantity supplied, exactly the same, except they are from the perspective of a supplier or a seller. So for you, now you are selling me a milkshake. I'm the buyer, you're the seller, right?
Yes.
So you definitely have a supply of milkshakes, right?
Yes.
So the supply is set. What will determine how many milkshakes you are willing to sell to me?
Price.
Woo, that's exactly right. Price. So price is the determinant for you to offer me a certain number of milkshakes, right? So if the price goes up, will you be willing to sell me more milkshakes? Like if I said, I have $1, how many milkshakes will you sell me?
0.
Okay, I have $2.
0.
$3.
1.
Okay, so that is where the curve would start for you.
Okay.
$3. Now I have $4. This is per milkshake.
Okay, I'll still sell you 1.5. I'll sell you a bigger one.
Okay, all right. So what you're telling me is as the price goes up, you are more incentivized or more willing
To release
more of your supply, right? So that explains why the supply curve is upward sloping. It starts low on the left and it slopes upward to the right. As the price goes up, the quantity supplied goes up. The demand curve starts high on the left and it slopes downward as the price.
And that's where they come to intersect.
Right. At some point, they're going to intersect. At the intersection, that is the point at which the quantity demanded is equal to the quantity supplied. We also call it equilibrium, allocative efficiency, market clearing price. It's all the same thing. So as long as prices are allowed to move up or down to clear surpluses or shortages, then we say the market wants to move to equilibrium. In the long run, the market wants to be at equilibrium.
So do you think this is why there's sales on products when they're first released?
Absolutely.
So they know the demand is going to be high, like on a Tuesday when they're going to release a new album from Beyonce. So they can get $16.99 for it, but they know there's going to be a large demand for it, so they're willing to let it go for $11.99 to.
Okay, that would be a form of price discrimination. allowing the early birds to get the best price. A better example would be if I come out, okay, you know how Doritos has, they have a flavor competition at the
Yes.
Super Bowl, okay? And so sometimes those work out really well and sometimes they don't. So let's just say, for example, that one of the winners was, I don't know,
Mashed potatoes and gravy.
oh gosh, I would buy that. Something I wouldn't buy. Maybe like
Sushi.
no, I'd probably buy that. How about like pickled herring?
Okay.
Okay,
I can go with that.
pickled
I
herring.
would not want those.
I would not want those either. So the Doritos is going to come out with pickled herring, and it won. Oddly, it did, and they do this huge, ad campaign, and boom, it hits the shelf at a premium over the regular Doritos. So let's just say it's, I don't know, $5 a bag. Okay, the sales are below what they expect.
Okay.
Okay, so that means if you were looking at a graph, the sale price would be below that.
The equilibrium.
Exactly.
Where the supply and demand intersect.
Right. And so in this case, it would be that the quantity supplied is greater than the quantity demanded. Right?
Okay.
So what would you think would happen to the price of those pickled herring Doritos?
They would drop.
They would drop. And as the price dropped, the quantity demanded would inch up, right? The quantity supplied would inch down, and eventually we would come to equilibrium. So that is in a case where the market is allowed to adjust to a surplus. A shortage might be, okay, you want to go to a concert, a huge concert.
George Strait.
Okay, George Strait. And then
Dickies Arena.
That's a good one for if you're not a country western fan. For example, my son went to Ooby Dooby a couple of months ago over here at Panther Pavilion. So they release a certain number of tickets, all right? And the tickets are now sold out. So you are going to the concert with your friends, all of whom planned ahead and have tickets. You don't. But you know that there's always going to be what? Scalpers, right? Yeah, supply. So you're standing out there in the parking lot with your friends and y'all are just shooting the breeze and you're trying to buy a ticket, but all of them are too expensive for what you want to pay, right? Because you have a price in mind. And then your friends go, hey, I think it's about to start. And they start wandering off and you're like, dang, I got to buy a ticket, right? So some dude comes up with tickets. And he says, let's just say that the face value of those tickets are $75. And so he says, I'd like to buy, here, I got a ticket for you. And you go, great, I'd like to pay $80. And he like laughs at you and says, nope, these tickets they're $100. And you go, I don't want to pay $100. And then right then, someone else comes up like from behind their car and they go, I'll give you $100. And you go, no, I will actually, I'll give you 110. And you have a bidding war. Because there is a shortage. And you bid it up until there is a point where the quantity supplied equals the quantity demanded. There is a win-win, and hopefully it's you, and you end up paying $150 for this ticket. You're somewhat happy because you get to go on with your friends. The guy's very happy, right? We've reached an equilibrium.
But if George Strait's into his second song and nobody else is asking for that ticket, I might be able to get it for less than what he's asking.
You might.
Because the demand is going to change in about 2.5 hours.
But then that's 2.5 hours that you didn't spend with your friends.
So it's an opportunity cost.
It is an opportunity cost.
You probably heard of cowbell.
Yeah, and the time value of money. So let's talk about shifts in demand and supply. So we talked about movement along the curve, and that happens when the price changes, right? What causes the demand and the supply curve itself to move? And this is all on the handout that you guys are going to immediately go home and print out. But basically, there's a laundry list of things that can cause the demand curve and the supply curve to change. And basically, it's going to be if there is a change in resource prices. All right. So, for example, if I'm a baker, I use sugar, flour, milk, and eggs.
And butter.
And butter, of course, because that's the kind of baker I am. If the price of all of those things goes up, that will affect the demand curve. Okay. And my entire demand curve will shift. If the price goes down, that will also affect my demand curve. Changes in preferences.
No, wait. I'm going to go back to that.
Okay,
As
yeah.
a student, that's a good question.
Okay.
So I'm baking cakes.
Yes.
And the price of all my materials, butter, sugar, flour, eggs, vanilla, all that stuff goes up.
Right.
That's going to affect the demand
Is that, well, if you're the baker, what's it going to affect?
It's going to affect my bottom line of how much it costs to make a cake.
If you're the baker, are you the demander or the supplier?
I am the supplier.
So it's going to affect your supply curve. Is it going to increase and move your supply curve right? Or is it going to decrease or move your supply curve left? If the price of everything goes up, will you make more or less?
That's based on demand, right?
You're operating independent of demand.
Okay. I'm going to make less.
Right. So if the increase in your resources, if it goes up, that means the supply curve is going to move to the left, which means that at every price, you will be producing less. Now, if we look at you independently and the demand curve remains the same, what will happen to the price?
Of the goods?
Yes.
Go up?
Exactly. It'll go up because you are going to pass all of those increased costs on to the buyer. Now, on the demand point of view, let's just use this same example and say that the general public is starting to watch what they eat, right? And so if they're staying away from fat and calories and everything yummy, what's going to happen to the overall demand for baked goods?
They're going to go down.
They're going to go down. So remember that right is good and left is bad. That's just basic easy. So if it's going to go down, it's going to move to the left. So if the demand curve alone moves to the left and the supply curve remains the same, what will happen to the price of the good?
They'll go down.
Exactly. So when you have problems like this, I suggest you draw a graph. And you draw the beginning graph with the price and the quantity demanded, and then you draw the change yourself. And that will allow you to determine what's going to happen to the quantity demanded and what's going to happen to the price. And that can be determined if one of the lines move. But what happens if they move together?
So supply goes up and demand goes up, or supply goes down and demand goes down?
Right, at the same time. I'm going to tell you.
Equilibrium?
Well, we will get to equilibrium, but the question is what happens to the price? What happens to the quantity that is exchanged? And the answer is you will not always be able to tell the answer.
Okay.
If you do not know the magnitude of the shift or the size of the shift, if I just tell you, hey, the demand for cake and cookies has gone down, you don't know, has it gone down 10% and 10% from what? So go back and look at the notes on this, and there's 4 possible scenarios. And in some, you'll be able to determine that the price will change, and in others, you'll be able to determine that the quantity will change. But in all 4 instances, there will be one unknown. And the answer will be, I think that the price will go up, but the quantity cannot be determined because we don't know the magnitude of the shift.
Okay.
Right? So that is all about supply and demand. So please go back and watch the lecture videos for the visuals on this to make sure that you understand that. And the last thing we're going to hit on here is going to be price ceilings and floors. What are they and why do we have them? So remember I said that as long as prices can change to clear surpluses and shortages, we'll reach equilibrium. Well, what if the price can't change? And why? What scenario can you imagine that would be an outside force affecting the market and not letting the price change? Government. Why would they do that? We talk a lot about the law of unintended consequences in economics. A lot of times the laws come from the right place, but they have the wrong results. So, for example, let's talk about ceilings first. A price ceiling may be set by the government if prices are viewed as too high. So a price ceiling is meant to protect the buyer. And an example is rent control. So there are rent-controlled apartments in a lot of big cities around the United States. So the reason for that is the realization that the average person cannot afford to live in New York or San Francisco or, Dallas, right? So the government's going to come in and they're going to say, hey, Mr. Landlord, that's you. You're Mr. Landlord. Mr. Landlord, 5% of all of your properties must be rent controlled. And you're going to go, what does that mean? Well, that means that if the going rate for your apartment is $800 a month, you can only charge $400. How do you feel about that?
I disagree with that.
You don't like that?
No.
Why not?
I'm for free enterprise.
Well, but what about all these people that can't afford a place to stay?
I think people should act independently of them. I understand what you're saying, and I do think that we do need some intervention, but I think that people can also change the market by.
Okay, but this is a real thing.
Yes,
I
it
mean,
is.
this is happening. So the
Yes.
government does come in. Now, let
New
me
York
ask
has this a
you,
lot, I know.
yeah, what is your incentive as a landlord to maintain those $400 apartments as opposed to your market priced $800 apartment?
Not much.
Not much. From the buyer's point of view, the line is out the door.
Yes.
Right? So I get there first and I get the apartment. I walk up and there's roaches and it's the linoleum is peeling up and maybe I'm not even allowed access to the community pool if I'm on this rent control. And I'm talking to the other people and they've got like granite countertops and wood scrape floors. So I'm going to come to you and I'm going to say, Mr. Landlord, why am I in a subpar unit? I'm in the same unit as everybody else and I can't go to the pool. And I've got really crappy floors.
No
and
Wi-Fi.
No Wi-Fi. So I'd like you to fix it. I'd like you to bring it up to par with the other apartments. And you're going to tell me what?
No.
What? Don't I have the right to have the same apartment as my neighbors?
No.
Why?
It's a free market.
And I'm not paying the same.
Exactly.
Right? So the unintended result of a price ceiling is shoddy merchandise, right? You have no incentive to maintain this. And for me as the buyer, I am kind of getting the short end of the stick. In addition, it leads to a black or gray market. So black is flat out illegal. Gray is on the border. It's sort of in that gray area. A black market is something that happens a lot because I will have a $400 apartment, but now I make a lot of money. And but I want to, keep this deal. So what if I rent out my $400 apartment for $500 because the market rate's $800 and I go live somewhere nicer? That sort of circumvents the whole deal, right? Or what if I say, hey, my brother's uncle is the maintenance guy over there and he can get you moved to the top of the list if you pay me $100. So these are all black or gray market things. So we also have what we call deadweight loss. Deadweight loss is a loss of efficiency when the quantity demanded does not equal the quantity supplied. And when we have an outside force that imposes measures on the market that allow it to not be at equilibrium, we're at disequilibrium, we have deadweight loss. And deadweight loss is always a negative, is always a bad thing. So that is a price ceiling. And the way to remember this is you cannot go above a ceiling. So if it's binding, which means effective, then the price will be below equilibrium. Can't go above it, all right? And then a floor is above equilibrium and you can't go below it. So a floor is when prices are viewed as too low and we're trying to protect the seller. So can you give me an idea of a minimum price that is put in place to protect people?
Minimum wage.
Minimum wage is a perfect example. Thank you, Austin. So, Austin, do you think that it would be a good idea for the minimum wage to be increased?
Yes.
And what I hear a lot is that it is not a living wage, that people cannot live and support their family on the minimum wage. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that.
Let me ask you this, though. Is the minimum wage meant to be a living wage to support a family?
No, it is not.
It is not. Who is the minimum wage for?
The minimum worker.
Well, it's for new entries
to the
exactly,
workforce.
Or people with no job skills, right?
Yes.
And the thought is that this would be maybe many of my listeners or someone that's in high school or right out of high school with no education and no job training. You get in, and the point is this is a starting place, and then you move upward and onward. And everyone listening to this is going to college so that you will not be paid the minimum wage, right? But let's just go with it. The minimum wage is put in there to protect the sellers of labor, all right? So what happens with this? How does this lead to inefficiency? The thought is that everyone will be paid more money, and so everyone will be able to afford more things. What's wrong with that logic?
It's not going to work, and this goes back at partially for me for what we talked about in the last podcast, specialization.
Okay.
If I go to work at a fast food restaurant, because we often use those as the example here, and I do the minimum amount of work and I put in the minimum amount of effort, and that's my continual effort, I'm going to stay at the minimum. But if I increase my value by specializing and being better, so if I learn every aspect of the business, whether it's closing it down at night, opening it up in the morning, are you utilizing any of the equipment in the kitchen or the front of the restaurant, selling to directly to the consumer, I increase my value to the person who owns that business. And if they keep me at the minimum wage at that point, then they're a fool in the market, because
Well, then you could leave.
that's exactly right. I can go apply my skill somewhere else.
Okay, that's a really good point. That leads to something else. Okay, so first, it's inefficient. And that logic that I said, everybody's going to make more money, therefore, everybody can buy more things. If everybody makes more money and there's more money out there, that means that there's the same amount of goods and services, but there's more people demanding them. What will happen to the price? They will go up if everyone's demanding the same amount of things.
Oh, wait. So if everybody's demanding the same amount of things, then they go up. Yeah, right.
Right. So the price is going to go up. So you're making more money, but everything costs more. And what's that going to do to the price of a hamburger at McDonald's?
It's going to go up.
Exactly. So that means the prices are going to go up for everyone. So that is a circular argument that does not hold water. So that is not a good thing to do. So it leads to inefficiency. It leads to increase in prices. It costs taxpayers money because of this inefficiency. And it also leads to a decrease in the quality of workers. Like you just said, you could start and you could just literally give the minimum, right? But I'm doing more. So shouldn't I be paid more, right? And then we come to the fact that increasing the minimum wage actually leads to increased discrimination. And I want to step aside for a second and explain that discrimination is not always racial or gender-based. You can discriminate on 1,000 things. And in this case, let me give me as an example. I own the restaurant and I have 10 employees. And some of them come to work and they're clean and they're well dressed and they comb their hair and they say yes ma'am and no ma'am to me, and I find them to be very polite and I really like them. A couple of people come to work and they're just always messy and their shirts aren't tucked in and they're unkempt and they are sullen and they don't meet my eye. All right, they all equally need the job. Okay, one lady actually, I don't know this, but she has 2 kids, and that's why she's always late, because she has to drop her kids off at the daycare. I don't know that, but I know she's always late, and I don't like that. The kids that are sullen have other issues going on, and I don't know that, but they're sullen. When the minimum wage kicks in, I'm going to have to make a decision. It's going up, and I'm going to have to say, I've got 10 people now. I'm only going to be able to keep 7 people on. Which 7 do you think I'm going to keep?
The dressed, well-dressed, clean, comb their hair.
Exactly right.
Showed up on time.
I am discriminating against the very people who need this job the most, because my great employees would probably be able to find work somewhere else. But these people that are late and messy and sullen, they need some job assistance. They need me to sit down and say, hey, you need to clean it up and you need to look me in the eye and you need to be polite and you need to be on time. But I don't have time for that because I'm running a business, right? So I'm going to be more discriminatory on who I hire as a result of an increase in minimum wage, which is going to hurt the very people that it's supposed to help. So bottom line, anytime that the government or any outside force comes in and limits the ability of the market to reach equilibrium, we're going to have inefficiency, we're going to have deadweight loss, and it is a negative. It is not a positive. All right, so let's see. Is there anything else we need to talk about? How about compliments? You brought this up, actually. What did you say earlier? You said you were talking about something that if I buy this, I've got to buy that.
Complex goods that are often used together so that consumption of one good tends to enhance consumption of the other.
Complements. 2 products that are typically purchased together: peanut butter and jelly, chips and hot sauce. So what are you? Are you a PB&J guy? Are you a hot dog guy?
I'm a PB&J.
Okay, PB&J. What happens to your purchases of peanut butter if the price of jelly goes way up. And you always buy them together.
I'm going to buy less peanut butter and
Yes, that's it. If compliments, things you always buy together, if the price of one goes up, you will buy less of the other. All right. So that's a compliment. You're going to buy less of the thing that the price goes up too. But now I want you need to be thinking about two graphs, not just one. You have a graph for peanut butter, you've got a graph for jelly. So with a compliment, if the price of one goes up, the consumption of the other goes down. Substitutes are goods that can be substituted for one another. In the consumer's mind, these things are interchangeable. It is not the same for everyone. But my examples would be Coke and Pepsi, Taco Bell and Taco Cabana, Doritos and Fritos.
Windex and insulin.
No. Maybe not that. But
Those would
like
not
that.
be things
Those
that,
would not be
like bad haircuts and hats. Those may go together, right?
Yeah, that would go together. But those would be complements, not substitutes.
Okay,
so a substitute, yeah. So Coke and Pepsi, Chick-fil-A, and I don't know, Chicken Express, those types of things. So for a substitute, if let's just say Taco Bell and Taco Cabana, it makes no difference to you, whichever one you come to first, you go, but you always go to those two. And you always buy like the $5 lunch meal deal. What happens when you pull into Taco Bell one day and they go, the $5 meal deal is now $5.99? Does that affect where you go from then on?
Yes, if Taco Cabana is now still $4.99.
Yes, exactly. So with a substitute, if the price of one good goes up, most consumers will substitute the less expensive good for the more expensive good. And that is called substitutes. And we're going to be talking about the substitution effect later. So we've got complements, we've got substitutes, we talked about demand, supply, quantity demanded, quantity supply, we talked about equilibrium, the law of demand. The law of demand just says that a higher price leads to a lower quantity demanded and vice versa. Why is the law of demand universally upheld? And there's two reasons. One is called the substitution effect. That goes back to what we were just talking about. So when one good goes up in price, you will buy less of it because you're substituting away. So that is called the substitution effect. And that explains why the law of demand is downward sloping. The other thing is called the income effect. And what this is I want you to imagine your income as a pie. Okay, so you have this pie and it's cut into all these different pieces. Typically, the largest part of the pie, 40% of the pie, so almost half of the pie, goes to rent. That's most people's biggest expense. All right. So let's just say that you have an apartment that you really like. It's got a lazy river. It's got sand volleyball on Friday nights. It's really, really cool. But you also, you have one slice of the pie is transportation, and one slice of the pie is entertainment, and then you've got education, and then you've got all these other things, right?
Clothing,
Gifts, toothpaste, everything else. So if this 40%, which is your rent, changes and becomes 50%, then are you going to look for a cheaper apartment so that you can maintain your standard of living? Or are you willing to cut out some of those other areas?
Let's drive a less fancy car.
Yeah, those are your options. Most people are going to go back to a substitution effect. They're going to find a substitute place to live so that they can maintain their cost of living. So that is the income effect, okay? With the law of supply says a higher price leads to a greater quantity supplied and vice versa. This is an easy one. The only reason is because as a supplier, you are motivated by profit. The more you sell, the more you profit. And that explains the law of supply. So
more sales equals more profit.
That's exactly right. Wait, I think I hear the stampede. That means it's our lightning round. So in our lightning round, I want to ask everyone at home to think about this, and I want to ask Austin, you to think about this right now. Can you think about anything in life that cannot be related to supply and demand?
Time.
No, time can. See, time is something that is limited,
yes,
right? We wish we had more of. Let me ask you in a different way. Do you think everything should be based on supply and demand? Do you think that there is too much emphasis on the person who has the ability to buy something is a person that has the right to consume it. Do you think that there should be more government oversight, which would basically be more price controls?
No, I do not.
So you are saying that you believe that the market is a good determinant of allocating resources.
I do. And I think people can make choices and do. I think some people choose to go to the movies when it first opens, and then some people choose to wait 6 months or 4 months until it comes to home video or something like that. So I think the market's controlled
I
pretty well by the
agree.
people.
And one thing that I think everybody needs to remember and realize is that we have the ability to choose. And I don't think that you want to ever give away or vote away your ability to make these kind of choices.
Delayed gratification.
Right.
in
You
those
may
cases.
not make the right choices, but at least they're your choices, right? So, all right, that's it for podcast number 4. We're signing off from the beautiful Tarrant County Connect campus on the Trinity River.
Send comments to your professor, Angela Thurman.
Absolutely. Thanks. Bye.